Denise Roche.
Tēnā koe, Mr Speaker, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa, ki ngā whanaunga I te whare paramata. Tēnei, tēnā koutou, tēnā tātou katoa. I rise to speak on the first reading of this bill, the Raukawa Claims Settlement Bill, on behalf of the Greens, and I maintain that it is a privilege to do so. Firstly, I would like to acknowledge those in the gallery today who've travelled from Tokoroa and Te Awamutu. I particularly want to acknowledge the chair of the Raukawa Kaumatua Kaungihiri, Hori Dean, the Kaumatua, James Clare, and Lorna and Ross Pope, the deputy chair of the Raukawa Charitable Trust, Katarina Hodge, the chair of the Raukawa Settlement Trust, Vanessa Iparaima, trustees Malvina McKenzie, John Stokes and Chris McKenzie, Raukawa Settlement Trust CEO Mahanga Maha, and treaty team members Nigel Tehiko and Phyllis Tahiri. And I know I have forgotten a lot of people who are up there today, but I mihi to you as well. For those in the gallery and those who are watching this at home, this is a great day, because this is the first part of creating the legislation that addresses the injustices that Raukawa ki Waikato have lived with since 1860. I also want to acknowledge those who aren't here today. On the long journey, there have been very many people over many generations that have worked to bring this settlement to the House. And in particular, I acknowledge Kaumatua George Whakatoi Rangitutia, who passed away nearly a year to the day. As the former chairman of the Raukawa Settlement Trust, he played a huge role in the negotiations, and his work was, in turn, a continuation of the work that his father had done before him. The first claims were lodged in the 1980s, but the journey to this day started long before then. I also want to acknowledge and thank the Treaty Minister, Chris Finlayson, and the member for the area, Louise Upston, for their actions on the day the deed of settlement was signed at Aotearoa Marae at Queen's Birthday weekend last year, and taking the deed to Waikato Hospital so that George Rangitutia could sign the document. It was a great gesture and a completion of a life's work to have this kaumatua sign the document on behalf of the Settlement Trust. Mr Speaker, I do have to declare my interest. In Raukawa, there is a saying, ko rangi nui te tuanui, ko papa tuanu ko te papa, ko te pō tuarongo kei pikitu, ko te pō toko manawa kei Ngātira, ko te pō tahu kei tarukenga ki te nākau, o na maihi taka mai ki te wairere ki horohoro. My iwi is Raukawa, my hapu is Ngāti Huri, our marae is Pikitu, as is mentioned in this saying. And before entering Parliament, I voted on this settlement, and I was honoured, very honoured, to join the Crown on the signing of the deed of settlement at Aotearoa Marae last year. The importance of the apology that the Crown has offered cannot ever be underestimated. In the bill, this piece of law that it will become, the second paragraph of the apology says, the Crown profoundly regrets and unreservedly apologises to Raukawa for its actions and omissions that led to the virtual landlessness of Raukawa and the Waikato, and which caused suffering and hardship to generations of Raukawa. Mr Speaker, those actions and omissions of the Crown are listed in the deed of settlement, and other speakers have outlined in detail some of those injustices. But for the record, I will include some of them, and that is the fierce reactions from the Crown to Raukawa's involvement in the Kingitanga movement, the Crown's actions against Raukawa during the 1860 wars in Taranaki, the Waikato and Tauranga, and the subsequent loss of Raukawa lives and the destruction of property, the confiscation of land in 1865, the Raupatu, the creation of the Native Land Court and the introduction of laws that saw the alienation of Raukawa from their land, the gifting of the 20,000 acres of the Puakani block to an iwi with no ancestral ties to the land, the refusal of the Crown to recognise the iwi status of Raukawa until the late 20th century, and that was a subsequent failure to respect the rangatiratanga of Raukawa. In section 3.10.2 in the settlement document, it sums it up pretty well. It reads, "The cumulative effect of the Crown's actions and omissions, particularly its failure to actively protect the interests of Raukawa and the land it wished to retain, left Raukawa virtually landless by the mid-20th century. The Crown's failure to ensure Raukawa had sufficient land for their present and future needs was a breach of the Treaty of Waitangi and its principles." Looking at the settlement, it's obvious that the treaty negotiation team have done a really good job in bringing this settlement to the House today. And it also remains clear that Raukawa have been very generous in accepting the terms of the deal. The redress offered by the Crown will never ever compensate for the incredible losses this iwi have endured. The commercial redress package, if the Central North Island forestry deal is included, comes to around $50 million. But we need to put this amount into context of other government spending. I've said this before when commenting on the commercial redresses and treaty bills. But we need to remember that the government bailed out the Southern Finance Company to the tune of $1.2 billion, and those investors didn't lose their mana or their land. Too often we find the commercial redress packages for iwi are criticised by New Zealanders who are ignorant of our nation's history. The history outlined in the House today and in the settlement deed and in the bill is acknowledged by both the Crown and Raukawa as being accurate. It saddens me to have read of this terrible suffering of my tupuna and to know that the ignorant in our society will call this attempt to right some of those wrongs a gravy train. As a nation, we have a long way to go to educate all our people on these treaty settlements and the partnership arrangement between Māori and the Crown, who represents everyone else in Aotearoa, New Zealand. The cultural redress aspect of this bill is also really important, especially when we consider that Raukawa were not officially recognised by the Crown as an iwi until around 1988. Ensuring that Raukawa are named and have their relationship with local authorities and government departments outlined in the legislation, that enshrines Raukawa's rightful relationship with their traditional resources, which includes geothermal areas, lands, rivers and maunga. And it means that right cannot be disputed. But it doesn't mean that Raukawa are the only iwi with claims in the area. Along with these negotiations, neighbouring iwi have also been involved, as there's areas of shared cultural value. And I note that Raukawa have been involved with the co-governance deal on the Waikato River and with Maniapoto on the Waipa River. And of course there may also be other iwi or hapu who the Select Committee may hear from who feel that they've been left out of the process, which is not surprising given that it is the Crown that dictates who they will and will not negotiate with. For the records, I should state that the Green Party position on these treaty settlement bills is that we do not believe it is a full and final settlement. It cannot be a final settlement when there are generations of Raukawa to come who will be affected by the injustices of the past. And it's not a full settlement because how can you compensate for what has been lost? And Raukawa are generous in accepting these terms. It was a very good deal, but it was a deal nonetheless. Having said that, this is a day of celebration. And I acknowledge that this is a time for Raukawa to plan for their future with a much better economic base. I'll end with the last part of the Crown apology, which says, the Crown apologises for its past failures to acknowledge the mana and rangatiratanga of Raukawa and looks forward to building an enduring relationship of mutual trust and cooperation with Raukawa that is based on respect for the Treaty of Waitangi and its principles. It's my sincere hope that we can move forward with that in mind. Nō reira, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa.
I call Claudette Howitt.